Hey guys, Mustached Tom here to review the movie I Saw the TV Glow. So, I'm super late on this movie, just FYI. The only reason I even discovered this movie is I started seeing reviews on it on my, timeline. So I finally decided to check it out despite it being as late as I was. And I gotta say, what a masterpiece. It is a movie that carries a lot of stuff, and we'll go over it as objectively as possible, though that might be a little bit harder for a movie like this. Despite that, I don't have any notes for this movie, so this will be a little bit more free flow of a review this time around. Whoopsie doodle. So, this movie pretty much follows a young boy, I think his name is Evan, coming across this TV show, The Pink Opaque, I remember the title, that's good, in which he finds another individual, slightly older, who's also heavily already invested in the show. And after watching the first episode, he and they both become obsessed with it in different ways. He sees it more as just a good TV show. She is connecting with it on a more personal level. But later on, we do see revelations that change perceptions over time. But for the time being, at least earlier on, I recall that the show, or the movie, is pretty much following this character as he's going through his young adult life, and he's questioned about things such as his sexuality that comes into question by her. She outright just says that she's attracted to other girls, and he has not really given it much thought at the time, which I would imagine most youths usually don't, but, in some cases it comes up. For me, I had a young crush, I remember, but I didn't go anywhere beyond that. I was too much an introvert back in the day. But this, among the many reviews that I've seen for this, they bring up TV shows in the 90s, because this is where primarily the show takes place in, at least the beginning half of the movie does. And that's a really interesting era, as I'm a 1990s kid, primarily. So all the shows that have been brought up, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I was a huge fan of that show myself, which I find funny. I had stated this once before in my April Fool's video, but it's true, that if that show came out today, the exact same way, everything about it the same, but it just came out in 2024, you can bet your bottom dollar every conservative would be like, YouTuber, reviewer, would be like, oh, that's woke. Guaranteed. Oh, Buffy's the girl boss character. She kicks too much butt. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, the secondary main character is suddenly a lesbian. Blah, blah, blah. That makes it bad. Woke. So, yeah. It's definitely a show I thoroughly enjoyed back then, but, there is a certain level of cheese to it, the earlier Buffy episodes. Other shows that sort of where you can definitely see inspiration, the Monster of the Week, very Power Rangers, a very male-centric show. The Powerpuff Girls, both in the masculine and feminine, in both the name and recognition. So this definitely deals with transgenderism as we understand it today, which, just as a reminder, that word wasn't a thing back in the 1990s. But what is interesting about gender, as I remember it anyway, is that people, the kids around my school, used to assign gender to people. One of the most common ones, at least when I was growing up, was the phrase of tomboy. Now, is a tomboy a boy? No, but it's used on girls who, quote-unquote, dress like boys, is sort of the idea of it. Was the idea of it, and it would be assigned to people by other people. And conservatives have gotten, I guess, mad and pissy that now self-ID is the new form of which, has been sort of swept in as the generations have gone by. I think they want to go back to the era of them having the control, them determining what you can and cannot be, what you can and cannot look like. Very authoritarian, dare I say. Just throwing that word out there. I don't know. But yeah, it's very reminiscent of that. Now, back to the context of the movie, and why that matters, is that the main character, or at least the male character, is indeed trying on more feminine clothing and feeling more comfortable in that, but we do see that later on in the movie. However, there's a great deal of repression, both in the context of the show that he is launching and the lives that he himself is living, and she as well. I don't recall the female character's name at this moment, and I didn't write it down, but point being is that they connect very deeply to the characters, and as a YouTube reviewer, I've definitely had my shows where I was connecting on a deeper level of that connective wavelength, I suppose, wanting the characters to succeed and all that. But she vanishes and a bunch of bad things happen, like his mom passing away and other bad events, like the show itself being cancelled abruptly. Now, this is both within context and subtextual, I suppose, is the best way of putting it, in that the idea is that since they were so attached to the show, as she put it earlier in the movie, that she felt like what that show was very much their lives, or the equivalent of it, so much so that the parallels were so close together that the distinction between those two things became very much in question, more so for him than her, which goes in line with regression. And we do indeed see that response by the father when they're driving home at one point. Him pointing out or making the remark that the show that he's suggesting to watch is aimed at girls. Therefore, that there would have been an idea, especially in the 90s, that, boys stick to boys stuff and girls stick to girls stuff. Though, a show like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I honestly would think would have emboldened more females to be more badass, retrospectively, looking back on it. but that didn't mean that other people couldn't connect to it. It was just that there's a certain embodiment of that show. And that is not the only show that would do that, but it is one that I hear many examples of when this movie in particular is talked about. So we deal with another aspect, and that is time and nostalgia. Now, there aren't a lot of horrific elements in this show. A lot of it is cheesy. There are certain imageries, like the ice cream man, when we first see him from that the young perspective, that is seen as more intimidating. Whereas in the rewatch, years later, it almost looks like a completely different show. And the ice cream man is substituted for a much nicer ice cream man, though being the villain, he gets turned into a good guy or whatever by the end of it. Sort of the idea there. And this show definitely brings into the forefront, as well as this trans heavy story, that the passage of time and regressing these ideas, these concepts, this life you could be living, is that he keeps on insisting that it's just, that's a separate thing. The TV show is a separate thing. Even though when she comes back, she's trying to convince him that the pink opaque is very much a part of their lives, is very much them, their adventures, and we do see, as I had mentioned just previously, the flashbacks of him trying on the more feminine clothing, and for the first time in the movie, smiling. These moments, in the context of the movie, are briefly shown. They are the briefest moments, as it were, as to signify that these are meant to be very much in secret and very much in stored within the memory, as it were. Which is why we see them as these short flashbacks. They aren't just flashbacks, they're short flashbacks, which I do think is a very intentional thing. And, again, the idea of time aggressively keeping up with the movie. We skip to 8 years later for the first time, as a part of this, where he now buys a modernized TV instead of the old-fashioned ones, the big screen TVs that we are a lot more accustomed to now. We're moving into the 2000 later era, but still a part of the suburbs, which I live in a more urban area, I suppose, if we're talking about that, but suburbs, as far as I have been led to believe, at least from media, is that they tend to move slower in progression, or at least, the world it seems to inhabit seems to almost seem isolated, more so isolated than other areas, which I think that does play a heavy part in it, is that while we are seeing these other people, they're never really making contact. The only other character I think we hear very much of is the mother and the father of the main character, Ethan. I think that's the name again, but other than that, I don't think there are any other characters that speak. Other than the show characters, I suppose. Which is this sort of almost bleakness in the level of communication that's used to take place. I think it would have been more active back then, and then as time moved forward, it would have gotten more empty. But it's to sort of consolidate the idea of this loneliness, or rather isolation, against all these forces that are just seeming beyond recognition almost. And the last bit really stretches the idea of the upward mobility of the world of America, capitalism. We see many years later the same character, now aged up even more, still pretty much working work, essentially not that far off from where he was, as we see him earlier pick up a job at a movie theater cleaning up garbage, and we cut to years later and he seems to be almost doing the exact same thing, but in a slightly different environment. It seems like more of an arcade-like system, like a Blockbuster, like a store or whatever. Dave and Buster, that's the store I was thinking of. And his position has barely changed, and that is a level of horror I don't think I've seen really explored in a lot of horror movies. The idea of the lack of things being done within a grand scale of time. This is definitely something that I have thought about personally as a YouTuber who lives where I live, and more importantly being a small YouTuber. Living in where I live, it has been relatively hard finding a job, period, and holding on to a job after I gotten injured seems almost impossible. So, there is this constant fear of not being able to find a position, and not even just being barely able to hold on these days. Which is, among other things, one of the reasons I like to stick to YouTube, but I recognize that there's that fear that I won't elevate past much higher than where I am now. And there is a horror to that I don't, again, I think gets addressed enough in movies, especially horror-based movies. This idea of time and what you are allotted to do with it. But the context of this movie is suggesting, very point blank, is that there is still this time, though the ending of the movie seems to, at least when I initially had watched it, I thought that the movie was very much of an ending of a life for the main character anyway. And I suggest this, though I don't know if it's the correct outcome, it's something you can definitely read into, is that there is a moment where, as I mentioned before, he's older now, much older, and you already got past the phase where he's mentioned that he's bought the new television and he has a wife and a family now. But what's interesting about that mention is that we never see these characters. He's just addressing us, the audience, and he's been doing that throughout the movie. We never meet who these people are that he's talking about, so there is this hollowness, and even through the expression after the fact of him saying it really spells out that there is this hollowness to the word love. And that much more is established later on, where there's this large party going on. He's still working there. He's older, and he's just panicked in this corner, and he screams out, and everyone stops. And what I first thought was happening, I thought he was having a heart attack. I thought, oh, he's dead. Like, that's him dying, and no one's really paying it much mind, is sort of the idea. But the movie keeps going past this point where he goes into the restroom and grabs a box cutter and opens up his chest. Now, there are implications earlier on in the movie with the connection of the show, where the character in the show had her heart removed and all this. So he opens up his chest to reveal these inner images, the glow, the metaphorical glow of the TV being the inside of one's self or soul or whatever you would want to call it, I guess. And it's interesting. I have seen so many debates on the trans issue prior to this, and one thing I have heard consistently is that there's this idea that trans people are lying about what they are doing. That this is a grand delusion, a delusion of mass, whatever. And this has been used in the past, no surprise, against gay people. The very same thing. But, a little bit worse, I suppose. Not that it's just delusional, it can be changed. They're sinful, you see, to be gay. I remember that. By the way, in 2024, those people still exist. Shocker. Shocker. Shocker that since we don't teach sex ed in every single high school, that still preludes the consciousness of people. That we don't just teach people that are getting ready to go out into the world and get jobs or go to college, we don't teach them, hey, you could be gay by the end of high school. We ought to be saying that in every high school. And the fuck are we doing? Where our education system is so fucked that we're having questions in 2024 about public bathrooms. How the fuck did we not solve this by now is a question that is beyond me. By the way, that is an issue that has existed all the way back in 1991, when I was born. And when I was growing up as a little kid, I remember seeing it on the news of that coming into play. This isn't a new issue, spoiler alert, in real life. Sorry, but the tangent is needed. I feel like it's a big part of this movie is to talk about what it means to be trans growing up. I mean, I'm not trans myself, but that doesn't mean I can't connect to other parts of this movie. So, one thing I did for myself is I was like, okay, there's sex and there's gender, and those two things mean different things. Sex is purely biological, and, you can lay all that down and do all the technical stuff and figure out, okay, if you're really pedantic, I suppose if you really boiled it down at minimum, there are 3 categories of biological sex. If you're talking about if there's even a slight variation that counts as a different category or number, which I do, because true objectivity demands it. That's mathematical. That's leaving out any subjective nature. Not, well, I feel that since it's 1.1% of the population that it doesn't simply count. No. That's not objectivity. You're removing objectivity as soon as you say that statistic and try to throw things off, I'm afraid. And yes, I include intersex as a sex when I say that, so that's what I'm alluding to. So you have sex, biological, and then you have gender, which deals with everything in the social realm. And this is where things get a lot more complicated, especially for conservative people, because remember what I just said, they're the ones saying this is a delusion. But here's the thing. If you can see it, is it a lie? If you can see a person wearing something, is that a lie? No. That's all that's it. That's the end of the conversation, or it should be, but it never tends to be. They keep going. They keep referring it to as a delusion, regardless. And it's like, how the fuck are people this stupid? How the fuck do people buy this absolute low IQ, low effort nonsense? It's absolutely ridiculous, right? So, what I did mentally is I made a distinction, just like for sex and gender, for transsexual and transgender. Since sex and gender I see as two different things, it would only make logical sense to make those two things different things. So transsexual is obviously you're going to get a sex change. The original word, that definition, I think that's left the zeitgeist of wordage that people use these days, is to get a sex change. That used to be what it was called until conservatives kept referring to it as a gender reassignment surgery. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's a sex change. You're changing your literal biological sex, your sexhood, your sex organs. That's what you're doing when you're changing your sex. That's a part of it. Like, yeah, you're changing your body, your biology. That's where that comes from. Figures, right? You just have to use your brain a little bit higher, when you think about this stuff. So, transgender is the social understanding. The masculine and the feminine. These words that I've been using very briefly. These are the ideas which are presented here, where the person isn't changing their biological sex, but they're changing how they operate in the social sense. They're feeling more comfortable wearing feminine clothing. I don't say they're wearing female clothing, I say feminine clothing, to distinguish that not all females wear female clothing. How about that? Because I know in the real world there are certain females that don't wear female clothing. They wear feminine clothing, or even masculine clothing. It's perception. That's what gender is. It's perception. You have to see it. That's why perception changes, which is why gender changes. That is why conservatives have a huge issue with the word, because it changes over time. But what they don't realize is that biology changes over time. That's how fucking stupid this conversation is. Biology literally fucking changes every single day. Hell, I would argue that biology changes more than gender does. Your biology literally changes every few seconds. Dead cells die in your body, and new ones form. That's new biology. And you age. Your body ages. Things happen to your flesh. Your biology, your body changes. It changes weight. Your physical weight. Your body changes every single day. So biology, unironically, changes more than gender, if anything. So I find this argument so baffling that people on the left struggle with this, by the way, and I am baffled by the ridiculous margins in which they do. It's probably because it's the world has become so much more dynamic, and I wasn't gonna mention it, but the whole Matt Walsh thing, he has the whole documentary, What is a Woman? That question is based on gender. You know why? Because there's the word female, which is the sex, and then there's the question of what is a woman. Woman is the word gendered. Just like male is the sex, and man is the gender word for it. That's why when people are asked what does it mean to be a man, or what does it mean to be a woman, or what is a woman, or what is a man, people have different answers. That's the reason. 'Cause the answers are fucking all over the place. 'Cause it's down to everyone's different perceptions of what that means. Wow! Crazy how that works. It's almost like it's very open. Seriously, this is something that I have been talked to so many times, so many different debates, still to this day. And I mentioned the public bathrooms, like intersex people, where do they go? Trans people, where do they go? This is still an issue in 2024, by the way. Apparently, we're still here. Back all the way in 1990. And here's the crazy part, and I think I know the reason why it's still unanswered. Capitalism. No, I'm not joking. I am not joking, because the answer is actually super easy. Think about it. We have family restrooms in our households. They are not separated by sex, are they? Right? Simple. Whoever goes in your household, right? You could have more than one restroom and all that, but whatever. And then there's a different type of bathroom that's more public, but outside it's like those stalls that are available. These are separated by occupied versus not occupied, and a lock system. That's it. Now, those have the vast misfortune of being stank. I won't deny that. But if you applied the occupied and not occupied stall to every public bathroom in the United States of America, this issue would be dead. It'd be over. There'd be nothing left to talk about in the sex who's allowed in what bathroom. It wouldn't matter anymore, because it's occupied or not occupied, not man, woman, the stick figure, the dress stick figure. It's not separated by that anymore, because apparently that fucks up conservatives' minds so much that they're like, no, that belongs to a woman, and they use that word. They don't say female, they say woman. And it's like, what do you mean when you say women in this year? They're talking about the gendered word when you say that word, I hope you know. So you're almost inviting trans people in, but then denying them that. So it's like this weird inner battle that people don't utilize language in the correct way when talking about this stuff. And I often think that certain conservatives do that on purpose sometimes, just to keep the conversation going, and going, and going, until the day they die. And so too do the other people that have to sit with this situation of never knowing what bathroom they are not allowed or allowed to use for the rest of their lives. They have to wait all the way until they can get to their family household and, go in peace. Other than that, they just have to hold it in or whatever, some shit anyway. So, getting back to the movie, I saw The TV Glow is a masterpiece. It's an easy 10 out of 10 for me. I might be late, but this is definitely a movie that I think needed to exist, especially now. And I wish there were more movies like this, that they, I do appreciate both types of movies. I like this more vague, open, sort of layered movie. But I would also appreciate, next to it, a more direct movie. And I think what would make sense, and maybe, I don't know, I can't speak to the director, but I would be like, hey, what if we created a separate movie and had it be more direct? Now, I know that there already be issues, because I know in the world of true media is that there are still problems with representation. to this very day. Shocker that, you know, what it means to be gay in media. You know, the amount of well-written gay characters is something I have talked about before. And the amount I can I can probably name them on one hand. Because I don't know that many. Because soccer, real representation doesn't really happen all that often. You know, people are like, pointing this out with Disney all the time, and it's like, yeah, Disney's liberal when it suits their corporate interests, but they're also conservative when it serves their interests too. So they're gonna hold their chest close to their chest and say, that's gay representation for the gay folk. Give us your gay box, and the conservatives are getting angry. We're gonna we're gonna make a statement saying it wasn't that meant to be that thing. Whoopsie daisy. That's Disney in a nutshell. That's why you're never gonna get good representation in Disney. Look at what happened to the Owl House. I've stated that before. Again, a very escapist type show where you have characters literally leaving into another world in this sense. This idea of literal escapism, escaping this world to another, being isekai'd if we're doing the whole Japanese thing. But funny thing is that, like, Owl House gets cancelled, and it's like, well, that's a shame. It's like, finally you get some obvious representation, and it's like, well, that's not enough, because Disney all of a sudden becomes, again, as I mentioned, conservative when it needs to look conservative, because it's a company, and it needs to save face. It's not allowed to be brave. It's not allowed to be super gay like indie company like Hell of a Boss or Has Been Hotel. That's why I love those shows now, because the gay rep is allowed to be gay rep. The lesbian rep is allowed to be lesbian rep. The trans representation is allowed to be openly trans. The ace representation, which came up in the show, one of the shows, I think it's Has Been Hotel, right? Is allowed to do that. It's allowed to explore that, or at least bring it up, even in a more joking manner. But at least it's getting a step, right? Which is like, I don't even know what characters would fall under the ace category outside that show now. I honestly couldn't tell you, because I have no clue. Like, if I just had to throw a name based on their attitude and based on, like, just vibes, I'd probably say Monkey D. Luffy from One Piece. Like, I don't know. He doesn't seem like someone that settles down or cares to. He's very much more invested in his journey in finding his little One Piece, as it were. But speaking of that show, very trans-friendly, I suppose, and to a degree. Or, like, at least, like, having that door, you know, how open it swings could probably vary from person to person, because certain people will probably look at that and go, oh, that's good representation, and other people will probably go, well, that's just, it seems almost more mockery. I don't know which one I would fall under myself, but it is there. So it's so interesting to see in just the TV shows that we have grown up on, and because this movie deals with so much of the early 1990s TV era, and how much that dynamic has changed, and simultaneously how it's not changed. You know, dynamically, like, I would say an argument is that in CGI, the world has vastly changed. CGI has become vastly impressive if you have the money to make CGI look impressive. That's the world we live in now. But representation is still feeling like it's left to the indie. It's left to the independent creators to step up and create that space. And that's why I wish I had the ability to draw, because I have ideas, and they're very LGBT focused. Like, they're very much that, and I'm a writer. I love writing, but I don't think writing alone sells on YouTube. The visual media, YouTube very much feels like it's very much akin very closely to a TV type of media, very visual media, which is why I feel like making a show or an animated show would be much more prevalent. But again, I don't have drawing capabilities, and I also don't have a lot of money. I can't afford to buy an artist for, like, even a pilot episode. I can't afford to buy voice actors. I would have to do all the voices myself, very likely, if I were to do something like that. And that sort of alludes to that very slow-paced fear that I have, because there's this idea that I want to explore outwardly, and I feel like this is the best way to do it. To explore it through this medium and share it with others. For myself and for others, but the problem is that my channel is small, and I am poor as fuck. So, like, I don't know what to do. I wish, like, I had the courage and the wherewithal to make a Kickstarter thing, but, like, I would have nothing to show for it, because I don't have the artistry to have something to show for it. And I don't know, again, if writing something on there would be good enough. I don't know if that would sell the idea enough. Which is why I'm so fearful of exploring the idea simply through writing. Especially as someone who has already published 2 books, Syndicate X and Syndicate X2. I know what it's like to put something out there and have it fail. Syndicate X has failed. So there is this deeper fear of not being able to sell this idea or to promote this idea in a meaningful way, in a way that more people are seeing it. Like, for the first time in many years, there are players experiencing Syndicate X through the book as a D&D campaign, and a lot of that is, exploring a very X-Men type of story, if people needed a comparison show. Very superhero-based, but very, the superheroes are the ones seen as the outcast group, and so on and so forth. But it takes place in a more modern time. X-Men is very early 90s, as the title even suggests as such. Even its reboot does as well. Syndicate X is meant to be a more modernized or even futuristic type world where these issues are still very much present, because, shocker, in 2024, they still are. They have yet to go away. We still have some of the issues that have prolonged and proliferated since, again, the 1990s. I look at American history, and I keep thinking to myself, damn, we might be the greatest country in the world, but we are a B-tier country. We are. We've never reached Donald Trump's greatness, and yes, I mentioned his name. We've never done that in American history. I don't think we've done it yet. Nope. Not even close. Our education system alone proves that. If you don't know, look that up. Look at across the United States. Look how shit we are. And realize we have not reached greatness. Because we still look at it that way. And that's a failure of our entire system, our entire educational system, from high school to transitioning to either college or getting a job. That system is still fucked, and it's 2024. That's not greatness. That's far from greatness. So, let that be a lesson if you somehow made it this far in the video. Anyway, I'm off the handle on this review, but hey, this movie brings out, subject matters that again, go beyond just the intended message, so there's that. Anyway, that's my review of I Saw the TV Glow. If you ended up enjoying it, plus the horror self-rant or review or whatever that was, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second, to my PayPal where you can help support me and my channel directly. And third, to my Discord server, you can join collab, shield, all that cool stuff. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.